December the 13th, 2016. This is about the electors, and there was just recently a judgment by a judge appointed by Bill Clinton in 1995, who decided that the electors in that state would have to follow the state law that said the electors must vote for the candidate that won the popular vote. Now, the Constitution does allow, it was intended always to allow the electors to have the last say. It was a way of protecting the country from this groupthink way. They probably didn't call it that, but that's really what it was about. Sometimes you get really caught up in the emotions and you elect someone, or you make a decision that later you wish you hadn't made, and at the time it made perfect sense. This was why it was set up, the Electoral College. However, as this judge pointed out, this law was passed, and most likely it was passed because somewhere along the line, electors did not vote the way the popular vote went. And they probably ignored the discussion at the time that said, this is not a good idea. Today, you get roasted because they didn't think ahead of time. Now, we are talking now, or at least a lot of liberals seem to be talking now, about getting rid of the Electoral College. The problem with that is it would require an amendment process, which liberals have very rarely used that process because it takes too long and it requires 2/3 of the country to agree with you, and it's just not something that they like. So, you make these end runs around it by going through the Supreme Court, getting 5 votes for, whatever, and they look at a law and say, this one word allows for a right or whatever. That is your short thinking, and you've got to stop it, because it leads you to these kind of messes every time. It happened with the healthcare law. It happened with the votes on judges, where you were told at the time changing it from 66 votes to 51 was not a good choice. And now you face 4 years and you're stuck there with this. Now, it is going to be almost impossible to get 2/3 of the states to vote to give away their say in who gets elected to be president of the United States. And that would be what you would be asking in the constitutional amendment. It makes more sense to simply change the laws locally back to the way the Constitution was meant to be, and we need to start trusting in the process. Don't keep digging a bigger hole. The Constitution sometimes will not give you what you want, or it makes it really hard for you to do these experimentations. This country is not meant to be guinea pigs, okay, for your social experiments. And as far as the Republicans go, conservatives, you need to understand the Constitution does not care whether it's moral or not. It has nothing to do with that. The Constitution limits government's ability to regulate our rights. That is all it was meant to do. The articles of the Constitution covered specifically what rights the government has. The amendments were added specifically because they were to protect rights that could not be touched, that no matter what, they cannot violate these laws. And in order to change that, you would need to get an amendment to remove it, to repeal it. Now, obviously, you keep making the mistake that you can pass laws to deny marriage license, or pass laws to deny people to go into a bathroom. And most part, I agree with you. I think it's really silly that we're having these arguments. But the fact is, it is not in the Constitution. It does not allow the federal government to go into your to basically decide how your body gets used. Okay, regardless of whether or not you agree with these people, it isn't something the Constitution allows. That is why you pass these laws, and anybody with common sense would know if it goes to the federal government and the judges have to make that decision, they have to find it unconstitutional. The problem is you all end up voting, and you pass these laws that gets unconstitutional, and you tend to ignore the fact that morality needs to be taught at home. You need to teach your kids this. By using it, the Supreme Court, you're creating the impression to the younger generation that they now have a new right. The Constitution, the judges do not give that right. It has nothing to do with them allowing you to have a right. There is no right to the government handling whether or not you can be married or not. That is the abortion also. There is no right to it. All they did was decide the government does not have, under the Constitution, a right to regulate this. It is a right that is given to the states and this public, and you cannot touch it without an amendment. We have, both liberals and Democrats have got to wake up and quit doing this to ourselves. The reason why they made it so hard to pass an amendment is to give us time to think, to not get into this groupthink where we think it's got to be fixed right now, and it damages us. And this is dangerous. That's why we're a 50-50 nation right now. 2/3 of the country in the old days had to vote to change and give the federal government. They had to actually ask for the right, and it had to go through the states, and it had to go through the people. They got a chance to vote on it. It took a long time, that is true. But by the end of it, the ones that didn't support it at least feel like they had their voice heard, and you could guarantee that 66% of the country did at least agree with this new right. That is far more positive than to have 5 judges decide whether or not they can take or give away a right to the federal government. It's got to stop. And we all need to understand there are differences between morality, between passing laws, and between Constitution. Morality is best taught at home. Nobody else can teach it as best as you can. Because everybody's got their own view of what morality is. Laws are passed to protect people with morality from people who are ethically challenged. And then you have the Constitution, which its only duty is to stop us from the public, the big group, the majority of us, from stepping on our rights. And it's got that makes sense. It's important we do these things. There is a reason. The founding fathers were not stupid. they knew this stuff, and we now need to relearn it. We need to start using the Constitution in the way that it was always meant to be. It's not that the Constitution has changed, it's not weakened, it's just we don't use it that way, and we have got to get back to that. Okay, I've had my say. It is long, and I figure you probably won't get to this point, but if you do, I appreciate you listening. Thank you. Bye bye.